Greetings, M Squared here. Today we're going to continue our topic of completing the square, which is one of the 5 ways to solve quadratic equations. We just kind of did part 1 of it in the previous video, so now we're going to take it to the next step. So we already did steps 1 through 5, excuse my misnumbering there. Today we're going to continue with this, but really we've already done this part in a previous video when we were taking square roots. So it's kind of combining two things. Hopefully it won't seem that overwhelming because completing the square can be one of the toughest ones to learn. Hopefully we've spread it out a little bit and it's not going to be too bad. So the first step is we need to move C to the right side. Remember, this is our quadratic term. The number in front of it is a 1. That's our quadratic coefficient, or our A. This is our B, the negative 18, because that sits in front of the X. That's our linear coefficient, and this is our constant, or our C. So we're going to move C to the other side. So we're going to get x squared minus 18x equals negative 80. What's our next step? Make sure A is 1. It is. Take half of b, square it, and add it to both sides. Well, half of b is 9, negative 9. If I square it, I get 81, so I'm going to add 81 to both sides. Got it. Okay, now factor the left side. So I'm going to factor it, and that's what this is here for. So I'm going to put that over here. Remember, it's the square root of this, the square root of that, or half of this. That sign is always going to be the same as the linear coefficient originally. So half of b squared goes here. Half of b goes here, or the square root. So we get x minus 9. Negative 80 plus 80 is 1. So we check. It doesn't say that up here, but at this point we're, oh yeah, it does. Does it? No, it doesn't. Maybe that was the step I missed. You're supposed to check to see if it's negative, because you can't square root a negative. You can't square something and get a negative. So if we were going to square root the negative number, it wouldn't work because all we know about it is real numbers. We have to wait till algebra 2 till we learn the rest of our numbers. So let's square root both sides. We're going to square root both sides. And then it says, remember our plus or minus. Remember, that's super important. So the square root of 1 is 1. So that's a rational number. We got plus or minus. That means one answer was positive, one answer is negative, because remember, when I'm taking something and squaring it and getting a 1, that's either a 1 times 1 gets me a 1, or negative 1 times negative 1 gets me a 1. Now I need to solve, so I'm going to add 9 to both sides. I'm going to get x equals 9 plus or minus 1. So if you want to do it, if you like doing it separate, you can say 9 plus 1 or 9 minus 1. Or you can just do it from here. X equals 9 plus 1 is 10. Or 9 minus 1 is 8, and those are our answers. And those are rational numbers. Hopefully you remember the difference between a rational number and an irrational number. The next lesson we're going to talk about irrational numbers. But in today's work, all of the answers should round to a pretty little decimal or get a fraction. You won't have any square roots of 7s where the number goes on forever and never repeats, and so you have to round. Shouldn't have to round. We want the exact answer in decimal or fraction form. Okay, so what you should do is look at these, pause your video, try to do them on your own, and then come back and see if you're right. We'll continue. So first step, get C on to the right side. It's already there. Second step, take half of B. B is 2, right? So half of it would be negative 1, but when I square it, I just get a 1. And add that to both sides. So I'm adding 1 to both sides. I get x squared minus 2x plus 1 equals 64. The next step is to factor the left side. Remember, 2 factors of 1 that add up to negative 2. That's negative 1 and 1. But instead of writing x minus 1 times x minus 1, our goal is to get a binomial squared. That's why we added the 1. Any other number you would have added, you wouldn't have gotten this pattern. So that's our goal, is to get that pattern so that it's nice and pretty for us. And then we square root both sides. So we get x minus 1 equals plus or minus 8. So our answers are x equals, we're going to add 1 to both sides. We're going to get 1 plus or minus 8. So we get 1 plus 8 or 1 minus 8. And those are our answers. Okay, last problem. We need to get C on the right side and A and B on the left side. So we're going to have to switch to the negative. We're going to subtract 3 from both sides. We're going to add 4x to both sides. Those cancel, those cancel. So we get, I'll write it over here, x squared plus 4x equals negative 3. Then we're going to take, that's the first step. take half of b. B is 4. Half of b is 2. Square it, 4. We're going to add it to both sides. So we get x squared plus 4x plus 4 equals 1. Now we're going to factor this side. Remember, the reason we added that 4 was the only number that would get us a pretty little binomial squared. So we know that this has to be the square root of this and half of that. That's what's going to go in there, because x times x is x squared, 2x, and 2x gets me my 4x, and 2 times 2 is 4. That's a beautiful little thing. We get a 1. Now we're going to, next step, square root both sides. And don't forget your plus or minus. We get x plus 2 equals plus or minus 1. So we get x equals, when I subtract 2 from both sides, negative 2 plus or minus 1. So we get negative 2 plus 1 or negative 2 minus 1. Don't forget, you can always check by plugging one of these back in. So let's just do that real quick. Here, we'll put it, because I haven't done that yet. Let's check. We're going to say negative 1. We're going to check the negative 1. Squared plus 3 equals negative 4 times negative 1. So negative 1 squared is 1. 1 plus 3 is 4. And negative 4 times negative 1 is also 4. So it checks. And you should do that every time if you want to make sure you know what, if you're right or not. It's always, that's the lovely thing about solving equations, is you plug it back into the original equation to check if you're right, and you'll know you're right. So especially on a quiz or test, you'll want to do that. Good luck with that. M Squared signing out.